Welcome back to How I Made It Through podcast. I'm Bernadette Thompson, and I'm really happy to have today as my guest Heather Vandermeyden. She was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, and has always felt a deep connection to the surrounding mountains. Her love of nature and peace, it brings a steady guide on her journey of healing and transformation. Heather serves on the board as a member of the Utah chapter of the International Association for Near-Death Studies and is a passionate speaker, sharing her extraordinary near-death experiences to offer hope and healing for those navigating grief and trauma. Heather is the mother of two, a son and a daughter, and both born after her profound near-death experience. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you were here. You know, we got a chance to meet at the IANS conference this year, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And it is an amazing place where people come together who have had these experiences, who are interested in consciousness and what happens after we pass. And it was just an amazing conference this year as it was the 50th anniversary.
I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay and just bask in the love. It was amazing.
Yeah. When we're there, and you and I both know this, that we just meet the most amazing people.
Yeah.
Because everybody's story is different. I haven't had a near-death experience, but I have had many spiritually transformative experiences. But it is I went from person to person just visiting, and you were one of the ones that just has an incredible story. And I would love to look at you now and see this beautiful woman sitting in front of us who is mother of two children and doing all the things that you're doing now. I'd love for you to take us back and share with us your journey with your near-death experiences.
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, very religious area, and had a normal, great, amazing life, and married young, 18. And by the time I was 19, after being healthy my entire life, I became really sick overnight pretty much. And about a year later, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And I had a severe form of it. Usually you can take medication and you can be in remission. And I could not gain remission. So for about a year and a half, I got sicker and sicker. And one day I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table visiting. I was by myself, and I heard a voice say, "You're going to die soon, but you're going to be okay." And I was like, what? I feel like I'm healthy. And again, I was quite sick at that point, but in complete denial. And I looked around the room and there was no one there. But this voice felt very familiar to me in a way. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm going to die. I'm not going to tell my family. That would probably upset them, but I should probably prepare for that. And I just assumed it would be a car accident or something, because I didn't acknowledge how ill I actually was. I'd had to quit my job a few months before that. I couldn't work. I was down to like 94 pounds at that point. And over the next few months, I became sicker and sicker. My lungs collapsed, and I thought I had a backache. I have a very high pain tolerance, so I just, for a week, thought it was a backache, but it was collapsed lungs and pneumonia. So I was in and out of the hospital quite a bit as they tried to stabilize me. In December of that year, I ended up back at the hospital a few times, and at one point a doctor decided to admit me. And I remember telling him, I'm not that sick. I don't need to be admitted. I just have a really high fever. It was about 104, 105 at that point. But he admitted me, and he saved my life. If I had not been admitted, I wouldn't be here today. Once I was admitted, they did multiple imaging and blood work tests to find out what was happening, and told me I had about 24 hours to live. My large intestine had perforated and was becoming toxic and needed to be removed. And I remember looking at the doctor and saying, I'm not really that sick, and I have a family Christmas party. Can I come back? And I don't think we need to do surgery. And my family was like, oh, she's crazy. So I ended up having the surgery on December 23rd. This was in 1999. So Y2K is happening. And I remember being so scared, being wheeled into the operating room. It was so cold. And I was terrified. I thought, I'm gonna die. I heard that voice, I'm gonna die. And I didn't. I woke up in profound pain, but I was alive. And then on New Year's Eve, as the nurses were checking on my incision, I had an 8-inch incision on my stomach. I felt my body float, not knowing what it was. I was very confused, but it felt like my body was floating up on the bed to about the shoulder height of the nurses. And I thought, why are they lifting the bed up so high? Very, very confused. And so they worked on me for a few minutes, checked my vitals, and left the room. And then slowly I felt my body go back down into the position of where I'd been laying. And I had family in the room at the time, and I noticed that they weren't noticing me floating. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to say anything. And at this point, I was not on narcotics. I hated the feeling of anesthesia and narcotics. And so I would refuse to use the morphine pump that was given to me. So I was fully alert and conscious when this was happening. Very confusing. So I didn't say anything and just kind of went on with the day. And that was Y2K that night. And so there was a lot of chaos in the hospital, waiting to see if the machines would shut down. They didn't, and we were fine. On January 3rd, so a couple of days later, my small intestine came out of my stomach. And I had at that point a colostomy bag. And the doctor came in to check on me and immediately brought me back into surgery and replaced my intestine into my stomach. And then a week later, it happened again. And this is when I went critical. And this is when I started leaving my body. And over the next 3 weeks, it happened multiple times. And the experiences were so profound that it changed every aspect of my life. I think of it as like the before and the after. There was before I entered this beautiful realm of love, and the after, and it changed everything. So after the third surgery, I developed what's called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. And your lungs are basically suffocating. You're suffocating to death. You can't breathe. It's a really scary, scary feeling to not have any control over your breathing. It feels like your heart's pounding out of your chest. And I had a very high fever. It was 107.5. I was septic. I was really, really ill. And they decided they were going to intubate me to help with my breathing. And my dad was in the room. My mom had left to go. They were moving me to another critical care unit room. So she went to get my belongings. And my dad heard a voice say his name, Craig. And he looked around the room and no one was talking to him. It was a female voice. And he said, yes. And then he, at that point, noticed that it wasn't anyone. There was about 6 to 8 nurses working on me. And he told me later that he knew that that voice was not from this world. And he assumed that it was probably his mother who had passed away, my grandmother. So they asked my parents and family to leave the room. I'd become very, very critical, and they needed to work fast to stabilize me. And my parents and family were put in a waiting room in a hallway. And suddenly they saw my body on the gurney being run down the hallway, and screaming nurses everywhere. And they said I was critical and they needed to work fast. At that point, I suddenly found myself to the side of the room. To my right, there was a nurse's station with nurses working. And to my left was a hospital bed with a young girl on the bed and nurses around her. And it was hard to see the girl because there were so many nurses and they were working so fast. You could tell it was a very chaotic situation. And I watched for a few minutes, wondering who this girl was. It was like watching a movie, kind of. I was a little interested to see what happened, but I didn't know who they were, so there was no emotional attachment. But I suddenly realized I could understand and feel the thoughts of the nurses, and they were scared. And they were thinking, she's going to die, and we're going to be here when she dies. She's so young. How do we tell her family? These thoughts were just coming to me. And then I felt the thoughts of this girl, and she was in full terror as they were trying to resuscitate her and save her life. And after about 5 minutes of watching, I realized that that girl was me. And it was like a sucker punch to the stomach because I didn't know her. I didn't feel like she was me. It was just so profoundly weird to know that that was my body when I was already out of my body, and I felt more alive in that moment than I ever had in my entire life. I felt like I was back home, and I was surrounded by this beautiful, immense love. And best of all, I was not feeling any pain. And I'd been in really, really severe pain for quite a while, being sick for so long, and then all the surgeries, but there was no pain. I just felt in this sea of love. And it was very shocking to know that I was watching myself be resuscitated. And I didn't want to go back to that body. I thought I could stay in this space forever. I don't know where I'm at. I was sitting in these seats that kind of looked like stadium seating. And I felt so peaceful. And I thought, I don't want to go back. The next thing I remember is being back in my body, and it was a dark room. My hands were tied to the bed, and I had something in my mouth that felt like a large straw that was chewy. And it was really confusing. I didn't know where I was. And it was scary. All these thoughts of fear were in my mind. And I tried to reach my hand up to see what was going on. And I'd hear someone scream at me, scream my name and say, put your hands down. I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up and it would happen again over and over. It was really a traumatizing experience. So once I came to and realized what was happening, I realized that it was a nurse that was sitting next to my bed, and I had been trying to pull out my ventilator when I'd wake up for anesthesia. And they were trying to get me not to do that, but the nurse he proved to be very abusive throughout my hospital stay, and probably should never have been a nurse. Mm-hmm. But at that point, I was thinking in my mind, okay, so I've been outside of my body. There's more to this earth than we realize. But I couldn't tell anyone because I was very, very critical at this point. I was in shock trauma, which is a very critical part of a hospital. And every part of my body was full of IVs and wires, and I couldn't communicate with anybody. And so over the next 3 weeks, I was able to leave my body multiple times. I could just think of, I don't want to be here, and I could pop out of my body. And it was this beautiful experience. When the pain would become too intense or the fevers would become too high, I had this escape where I could leave and just be in this pure bliss. And while I was out of my body, I was able to be with my relatives that had passed, my grandmother, my great-grandfather, and my aunt, and be in the comfort of them. And I felt so alive. Again, I couldn't tell my family that I didn't want to live, but I didn't. I wanted to be with them. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. But one of the experiences that was towards the very beginning, and this was actually a scary one, but I understand now what happened. But at the time, it was dark in the room, and I was in shock trauma, and suddenly my soul left my body at the most massive rate of speed, and I was going through this dark, dark area, and there was a man next to me in a suit. He looked like he was from the 1800s, and he had a top hat on and just a dark suit and facial hair, a beard and a mustache, and these dark eyes. And he was so close to me that I could have reached out and bonked heads with him. Like, his face was so close to mine. And he was lit in this brilliant light, but everything else was dark. And we were just flying at such a fast pace. And it was, every time I'd start to panic, I would pop back in my body. And over about 3 days, this happened over and over again. And he was with me every time, never said anything, but I felt like he was very loving, a loving soul. I wasn't scared of him. He was a very calm presence to me, but I didn't know who he was. And eventually I popped back into my body, and my nurses sedated me because I was not sleeping. And this happened in 2000. So about probably a month ago, and I've always thought, I don't know who this man is. About a month ago, I had a cousin reach out. She's a second cousin. And she said, I think I know who this soul is. And she gave me a name. It was my great-grandmother's father. And we have a lot of genealogy in our family. And I looked up some pictures through a website. And this would have been he's my great-grandfather, or great-great-grandfather. And there I saw this man staring back at me that was the soul in the tunnel. Makes me cry. It took 25 years to find out who he was. And obviously I never met him in this life. My great-grandmother had died 2 months before I was born. And here her father is, born well before I was alive and died well before that, trying to guide me back home through this tunnel, which to me just shows the bond that we have with the other side, with our family members that have passed. And it's been such a gift to know who that soul is. And I've been trying to do more research on him. He's got a really amazing story, and it's been fun to get to know him through these stories. So it kind of changed the feeling of that now. Looking back, I don't see it as a scary thing like I did then. I see it as a comfort of a family member being there to guide me back home. And I'm grateful for that now. When my fevers were 107.5, I was packed in ice. My entire bed was packed in ice, and they wouldn't give me any heated blankets because my fevers were so high, but I was freezing to death. Mm-hmm. And I kept saying, I'm so cold. But they were trying to get the fevers down before brain damage set in. And it became too intense to be there. And I left my body. And I found myself in front of this building that it was a very quiet area. There was dirt roads, no current, cars or anything like that. It felt very ancient. The building was very tall, and it had 2 pillars in the front. And the pillars were from, the bottom to the top of the roof. And the roof was very tall. And the door was very tall as well, probably 10 feet tall. And I could feel this energy behind me. It was a male energy. And I thought to myself, I want to be in that building. Like, it was beckoning me. And as soon as I thought that thought, I was inside the building without using the door. And I still had my earthly thoughts. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. But I eventually went into this room that was full of books that spanned from the floor to the ceiling. And it was round, like a round room. And every book you can imagine had to have been there with scrolls. And I just sat with this soul and read through the books and thought, there's endless amounts of books here. He opened the scrolls and let me read them. And then I was told that I would not remember what were in these books and scrolls. And I understood all the scrolls with ancient writing. I couldn't do that now. But as soon as I left the room, I knew I had read what were in the books and scrolls, but I couldn't remember them. The memory was taken immediately. And I found myself at the entrance to the building again. And off to my right, there was a podium. The room was full of people, and there were shelves everywhere that had books. It was like a building of knowledge is what I think of it as. Mm-hmm. But off to the right, there was a podium, like if you're giving a talk. And I thought, this is weird. There's no chairs for anyone to speak, so they must not be speaking right now. But I felt very drawn to the area. And so as I thought I need to go over there, it's like my body I glided over. And I'm thinking again, oh my gosh, I'm not even walking. I'm kind of like floating. This is amazing. As I got closer to the podium, it opened to the left and there were stairs, and I went down the stairs. I knew I needed to go down there. I didn't know it was down there, but I felt like it was drawing me in. And this soul was always behind my right shoulder, walked with me. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, the entire area was huge, and it was made of old stone rocks, and it was full of water. There was a pool of water. There was a waterfall with a mother and children, ponds of water, rivers. It was just amazing. And the water, it was full of life. I don't even know how to explain it, but the energy was just so alive and loving and happy. And it was brightly lit by the windows. I thought, I need to be in this pool of water. And so I walked into the water and sat down and kind of put my arms like this on the back and just sat there in the water. And I had quite long hair at the time. And I remember thinking, my hair's not even wet, but I can feel the water. And I was kind of pushing it back and forth like this, just enjoying being there. And that soul sat behind me, and we kind of conversed telepathically. There were no words that were ever used. It was all telepathic. And he told me that the water was healing water. And I knew that I needed to be there. I knew at this point that I was right on the edge of death, that if I was to survive, it would be a miracle. And then they told me every time they take me in for surgery, we don't know what we're doing, but we'll try our best and see if you survive. You're such a sick girl. So I knew that it was pretty bad. And I had been praying to pass away. And my mom had also been praying for that because she couldn't stand to see me suffer. It was everything that could go wrong was going wrong on a daily basis. And it was pure chaos. And she didn't want to see that be my life. So as I laid and sat in that water, I felt this healing energy come about me, and I felt the love just surround me. And over the next few days, I went to the water quite a bit. And every time I was there, I just felt full and healthy and so loved. And to this day, I love being in water. Just the sound of the water lapping against the sides of a river will just, it brings such peace to me, such profound peace. And I had probably, I think we counted about 20 different NDEs, but that was my absolute favorite one because it was such a loving energy for my soul. But as I was in the hospital room, I still continued to be pretty sick, and I was still in shock trauma. And one day I found myself in this rectangle room, and it was full of all these iridescent colors of light, golds and whites and pearl. And there was this older couple, a man and a woman, and they just emanated pure love. And they told me they were guardian angels, and they were helping the patients in the hospital, that they would minister their love and healing to these patients and to their families. And they said that if this patient was meant to pass away, that they would see God in the door that was in the room. It was a wooden door with the top part of it was glass. And they knew that if that patient was going to pass away, that they would help guide them back home, and they would comfort the family. And if that patient was meant to survive, then they would help give them the strength to heal their body in the best way possible. And they would still comfort the family as well, because it was, the patient needed the family to support them as well. And so we would go to different rooms of the hospital and see the patients that were there. And I would watch these two angels put their hands on the shoulders of not only the family, but of the patients. And you could see this light go from the angels to the other people that they had their hands on their shoulder. And it was this brilliant light. It was almost like swirling energy. And you could see that it was healing them. And if it wasn't healing them, if they weren't meant to survive, it was giving them strength and love. And there was a young man that had had a car accident that was there with his brother and his parents. And they put their hands on the shoulders of this family. And you could kind of see the family, like, it's almost like they just would, they didn't know what was happening, but they could feel, I feel like could feel that love. And that patient ultimately did pass on. But at one point, I saw God's face in the window of the door. And I knew him so profoundly. I remembered him from before this life. And I couldn't believe that he was there again. It was like going home and being embraced in the warmest hug that you've ever had, and being surrounded by your entire family when you've been gone for a while, and just feeling his love for me. He knew me. He knew everything of my life. He knew my suffering. He knew my joys. And I knew that I wasn't special in the way that it was only me that he knew. He knew every one of us. And I just basked in his love and knew that that was not the last time I would see him. But knowing that he knew of my struggles gave me comfort that it was not happening just because. It wasn't happening to me. It was happening for me. That this experience, as horrifically traumatic as it was, there was a reason for it. And I knew that I would figure out that reason at the right time. But seeing him there bring love to the other patients in the hospital was just this beautiful experience. And I wanted to tell my family about it. I was too sick at the time to communicate with them. But as the days grew on and I became a little bit less critical, I would write. I had a piece of paper I could write, and I would tell them some of these experiences. I would say I was with Grandma, or at one point I told him, Jesus is at the window. I can see him. He's just watching me. And it gave my family comfort. I asked him later, did that scare you? And they said, no, it gave us comfort to know that you were surrounded in love and that you were being protected. And my mom said, I thought that meant that you were going to die to see, to be seeing him there. But for me, I didn't feel that at that point, that he was coming to take me. I felt he was just there to offer his love and guidance for me and protection. As I stayed in the hospital, I kept having surgeries. I started getting really bad It's called interabdominal sepsis. So really bad pockets of abscesses and infection in my stomach. And they kept going in for surgery. And at one point I found myself over this field, green grass, and the grass was just flowing like kind of like this. And the sky was this brilliant color of blue. And the trees were just swaying to this music that was just energies of love. And there were 2 white tents down below. And again, this guide was with me, always there. And I kind of felt like we kind of floated down like this towards the tents and went inside. And the first thing I noticed is that the doctors that were in white coats were very busy. They had medical books and petri dishes, and they were just reading through these huge books. And I knew that they were trying to find a cure to help me. The second thing I noticed is that they didn't see me there. I was off to the side, and I thought, oh, they don't even see me. They don't know I'm here. But I watched them, and my guide said to me, they don't know how to heal you. It will be through faith and prayer alone that you will survive. And I thought, what a tremendous knowledge. And I thought, that is true. I had a lot of family praying for me. I was on a bunch of prayer chains. There were just millions of prayers, probably, everywhere, prayers and prayers for my recovery. And I see it as prayers are balls of light that go up, and they're not always answered the way we want, but they are heard. Mm-hmm. And I think on this earth, we expect if we want something that it's going to happen, and we get angry if we don't get our way. And, people were praying for a full recovery, and it didn't look like it would happen at that point because I was truly critical. I had some complications during a surgery, and they had basically paralyzed my left side, and I couldn't walk. And once the ventilator came out, I had to learn to talk again. I was really, really sick. But I feel like the prayers that were given on my behalf were heard. And in my mind, I see it like there's all these angels up there that they'll say, I'll take this prayer and I'll take that prayer and do the best we can to help this person. And if it's not answered the way we want it, it's answered the way that it needs to be answered. Even if we don't understand it, there's a reason for it. I had an aunt that had passed away a few years before I had this hospitalization, and one day she popped into the room and she said, do you want to come with me to my house? I was like, yeah, let's do it. And we went into her house. We just popped into the living room of where she had lived before she passed away. And her husband was still alive at this point. And I could see the room in a 360-degree view. It was really cool. Looked exactly the same, same shag carpet, same dark paneling. The TV was on those old, TVs with the wooden stands, like the TV was in the wood. Yeah, nothing had changed from the 70s. But I could see my uncle, and then my aunt said to me, he's going to pass away. And she showed me a scene of him passing in the hallway. He fell on the ground and he couldn't get up. He was older, and I could feel his fear that he was going to die there, and he had no one to help him. And it was really upsetting to me to see that he was alone and didn't have anyone to help him, and that he was going to die alone. And so once I was back in my body, I was trying to tell my family, you need to go check on him. And it was frustrating because I couldn't communicate with them. I had the ventilator in still, and my hands were too shaky to write a sentence on a piece of paper. And so it took about 3 days, and I finally wrote his name. And they had my grandpa, who lived across the street, go check on him and then come to the hospital because they could tell that I was really upset about something. And my grandpa said, no, he's okay. He's fine. And I went and checked on him. We talked, and he's good. And so about 15 years later, he was still healthy as can be, living. And I got a phone call that he had passed away. He'd fallen in the exact place in the hallway and had passed from the injuries of that. And it was very validating to me. I mean, my entire family knew the story. He's going to die in the hallway. But for it to actually happen, 15 years later, I, put it to the back of my mind and hadn't thought about it for years because I didn't understand why I had seen that scene. But it was the scene of how he passed. And the biggest takeaway I get from that is that there is no time on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so what maybe felt like just a split second there was 15 years on our timeline.
Wow.
Yeah, it did validate for me that these experiences happened for a reason.
Yeah.
So that was when my mom told me, I was like, oh my gosh. But
Well, yeah, you're. It is such a beautiful telling of your story. It's incredible. Um, I don't think I've ever sat this silently through someone sharing the whole. There's so much comfort, even though your story is so hard. There for anybody that is struggling with a severe critical illness, or somebody in their family is, that your experience and your death, your near death experiences are absolutely beautiful. And you were saying that that there was a reason for this. Just the telling of this story and the pure faith that showed throughout, as you were sharing it, and what was going on when you weren't here, is truly incredible. It's truly
it was a gift. At the time, I was really angry. I was angry that I was put back into a body that was so broken. It took a long time to get over that anger, but I'm so grateful for the gift now, because I was 20. I mean, I was so young, and I didn't understand fully what was happening. It took years and years to understand what a gift it was. And at the time, I just thought, I want to die. I want to be out of this body, and I want to go back to that place of love. I was so upset that I had to keep coming back to this body that was so broken.
Yeah.
And learning to walk and talk again was humiliating. I couldn't even sit up on my own to get up out of bed. I couldn't do anything by myself. I couldn't open up a jar of juice. I didn't have the strength. But I see it now in a different way, that people need to hear that there is an existence after we pass. That we don't die. In my mind, we step into another room, and it's just an existence that's past this one. We're back home. And so I'm grateful for that now, to understand it.
What stood out to me is, and this is why it's so helpful for somebody whose loved one is ill, is that you were able to leave your body in those really critical moments of when the pain was too much, when that there was this back and forth.
Yeah.
And that in itself is remarkable.
It really is.
It makes me think of being at IANS and the conversation, listening to Dr. Moody and Dr. Grayson talk about consciousness, and that this is really all about understanding that our consciousness lives on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But in your case, and I think in many other cases of near-death experiences, it is you are able to leave just to help your body survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was like your body was there. You were able to leave and not feel the pain.
Yeah. I truly know if I was in my body that entire time, I would not have survived. And I requested my medical records a couple of years ago, and they were really traumatic. I mean, there was a lot that was missing, but even reading it again it put me in therapy. I went to EMDR therapy for a year weekly after reading those records, because it was so hard to go back to that moment and see how sick I was.
And the way you tell it, you have told it in such a beautiful, calm way. You were sharing with us the dramatics of it, but you were sharing them without a lot of exclamation, so to speak. And I think that is so beautiful, because there's so much people can learn from your story just by the gentle way you share it. And there's I feel this like white light around you. And I'm going to say this I do connect with spirit. And so, spirit comes to me, and what I'm getting is very saintly, and that your gift to us is your ability to share it in a way that we can hear the whole story.
Yeah. And I kept it quiet for 23 years.
Really?
I would tell family and friends, but I didn't talk about it in public because I had a bunch of surgeons, but my main surgeon shut me down immediately when I told him I died. After I got out of the hospital, I said to him in an appointment, I died, right? And like he jerked like that. And you kind of have to know him. He's very clinical.
Yeah.
And that was not something that was even in his ability to understand. And so I thought, I can't talk about this because people aren't going to understand, and I don't want them to take away from the gift of it. And
Right.
So if I had someone in my life that was struggling with something, they're afraid of death or whatever, I would tell them little stories about it. But I didn't, the first time I spoke the full story about it was with the doctor that admitted me to the hospital originally, the ER doctor. We connected about 2 years ago and went to lunch. I talked to him at IANS in Arizona, and realized that he was the doctor at the hospital I was at. And we went together and had lunch, and I told him more of the story than I've ever told anyone, not realizing he was the doctor because I had a different name. I was married at the time. And he said, your name sounds familiar. But yeah, I gave him the information, and I started writing a book about it because I wanted to heal all the way, and I wanted my kids to understand my story because they were part of it. And when I was reading through my medical records, I saw his name as the doctor that admitted me, and I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. He saved my life, and he's had some really cool experiences himself with patients that have had NDEs. And so he was the perfect doctor to be there to save my life, I feel. And we become really good friends. He actually wrote the foreword in the book for me. But the children that I have now, when I was in the hospital, they were not born yet. They came to my bed multiple times to the foot of my bed over about a week period. And I was off the ventilator at this point. And I would tell my mom, there's those kids again. And sometimes they'd bring an older man in a gray suit with them. And sometimes it was the boy that came alone. But they would just show up at the bed, and she would say, what kids? And I'd say, well, the kids, like those kids, they're right there. And she says, I don't see them. And I was like, well, and I describe them. I say, the boy has blonde hair and green eyes, and the girl has, and it was curly blonde hair. And the girl has straight hair and green eyes. Don't you see them? They're right there. And she was kind of freaking out about this. But in my mind, I'm like, who are these kids? They were very comforting and very loving, but they never said anything. And eventually, after about a week, they stopped. And I would joke with my family, who are those kids? They're not mine. My husband at the time was darker. He was Portuguese, dark hair, dark eyes, very tan skin. And I'm dark. And I was like, there's no way we're having blonde kids with hazel eyes. It's just not going to happen. And I can't have kids at this point. My stomach's still cut open. They'd done so many surgeries that they had to leave my stomach open because they tried to, it was shredding, the skin was shredding, and they couldn't stitch it shut. They were trying to tie it shut with wire, and it wasn't working. So they just left it open and just packed it with packing. So I was like, there's no way I can, carry a child. And plus I can't even walk or sit up on my own. And so it just kind of got shelved. And I was, 20, so it's not like I needed to go out and be a mom at that point. But years later, I actually did adopt through the foster care system. I was sitting on my couch one day, and I heard my guide say to me, if you want to become a mother, it'll be through adoption. Basically, your body can't handle a birth. And I was like, well, that's for sure. I'd had 13 surgeries. I knew it wasn't safe. And so I started looking into adoption through foster care. I didn't realize that you could adopt through foster care. We were looking in international countries, my husband and I, and we were just going to do foster care as a way to help little kids until they could go back home. But I ended up having a couple of kids come in, and then the third child, when I got the call for him, I went and picked him up, and he had on this little fleece hat and a coat and some tiny little size 4K Swiss white shoes. I mean, tiny little thing, like 19-pound, almost 2-year-old. And when I got him home, I took off his hat, and boing, this blonde hair like flings out like white. His hair's white. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the child, much younger, but this is the child from the hospital. And it was just like this amazing, like, hello, little soul. And I didn't know at that point that we were going to adopt him. And it's kind of a weird situation where you don't want to be like, well, this is my child, and I don't want him to go back home, because I had so much love and empathy for his mom. Mm-hmm. And I knew that she wanted her baby back. And so I had to kind of step back and say, whatever's going to happen, I'm going to support her the best I can to be the best mom she can if he goes back. And if he stays, then I want her in his life. And ultimately, after about 1.5 years, we did adopt this little boy, and we chose an open adoption because I knew that his family loved him. And it was a tremendous loss for them to lose him. And I couldn't imagine them going through life not knowing that he was okay, and, looking at every child, and, went out in public to see if that is your child out there that maybe you'll run into. I just couldn't live with that guilt. And so I'm very, very grateful. I'm a huge supporter of open adoption. I think if the circumstances are right and it's safe, that child needs to know where they came from. They need to know they're loved, and they can ask the questions that I can't answer, because I wasn't there when they were born, and they need to have that ability. And so I'm very, very grateful for open adoption.
Yeah.
We had a couple of children, like quite a few children. We fostered 25 throughout 5 years, but I kept thinking, where's that baby? The little girl, where's she at? She was about 6 when I saw her in the hospital. But a couple of years later, I said to my guide, because he was still there around, I said, where's this little girl? Like, I know that there's a little girl out there. I saw her in the hospital. And I got the distinct knowledge that it was not her time yet, and that she would come when she was meant to come. And it kind of calmed my soul. And I thought, I don't need to worry anymore. And then one day I woke up, and I knew she was coming that day. And I knew that I needed to get ready for her. And so I started preparing for her. And that evening, about 4:30, I got a phone call from our caseworker that we'd been chosen as a legal risk placement for a baby. She was 11 weeks old. And that was the little girl. And her mom actually pulled me aside a couple of months into their reunification process and asked if my husband and I would adopt her. And that she had been told when she was pregnant that she would not be raising her, but that she would choose the mother that would. And it was just this, it makes me cry. I love my kids' parents. I mean,
but what's amazing, Heather, is, you and I are blessed because we are in community with people who understand this and know that these connections, and we connect with spirit. And but for those who don't, but are curious and wanting to, your story in so many ways is so beautiful. And I feel strongly that Spirit gave you this platform, not my platform, but has given you a platform to share all of it, to give faith and understanding. I mean, I think of the surrender that you did in all of your, in your health challenge, in waiting for your children to come. And it's just an amazing, beautiful story that is so beautifully told through you.
Yeah, I mean, it changed my life in every way.
Yeah.
And I think with adoption, you're severing the soul of the child from their birth family. Sometimes, that's how it is. They're having a loss that you can't understand unless you've experienced it.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very grateful that I've been able to include my kids' families. And my kids are adults now. They're 20 and 24. And so it's kind of their choice, how they move forward with that. But it was such a big family, with my kids' birth families when they were growing up. It was just a more extended family. And it was such a wonderful experience to have them be part of my kids growing up and see them. I just thought of them like extra sisters or I was really close to them. So for me, it was a really positive experience. And I would actually sit and talk. My daughter's dad's passed away, but we'd have these long conversations about, existence after this life and just, intelligent, fun conversations. And so I wouldn't have had that if I'd never met them. And I cherish those memories now that he's passed on.
And it is just, it's so special. And their generation, your kids' generation, my kids' generation, they are at a, it is they are going to be able to help raise the consciousness.
Yeah.
But your story is such a really one. I'm so grateful. I have put up the name. You have just released a book, Miracles from the Other Side: How My Near-Death Experience Saved My Life. How important your story is, and I say that I've read a lot of books, but I say that with such a real. A real deep honoring that the way your short story is told is going to help many, many people.
I think it will. My mom tells me that all the time, and I really love talking to people. There's been a really positive outpouring of love. I never wanted to publish the book. It scared me. I didn't want to put myself out there and be so vulnerable. There's some really heavy topics in it. And I thought I was going to write it for my children so they understand the story of how they came to be.
Yeah.
And suddenly it was published and I was like, what just happened? But I've had people reach out that in different countries even that it's touched their life and they're not scared of death anymore. And that to me is what my goal is. I don't want people to be afraid of what happens when we pass on.
And you have such a full story. I know time is like flying, and I know, and I need to wrap up, but it's like your story is so full from the beginning to the end. And so that no matter where somebody is in their journey of understanding near death, whether they know nothing or whether they are somebody that is further along and they understand it and they want to know more, or they want to, it has something for everyone.
Yeah.
And, so I just encourage, it will be in the show notes. And I also encourage anyone who needs a speaker to come and share your story with others, because it's one of the most beautiful tellings I've ever listened to. And so I really am so grateful. Is there anything you would love to share with everyone before we sign off?
Well, we skipped so many of the NDEs, but I'll just slip in a really fast one. When I knew that I was going to be staying here, at one point I found myself at the entrance to what I call heaven, and I was with my guide, and I knew if I got past that point, I could stay. And it was of the utmost important that I get through that point. And on both sides of the entrance were thousands and thousands of these souls lit in brilliant light, and I knew they were my relatives. And I thought, if I can get past here, I can stay here. And we're short for time, so I won't go into details, but I remember thinking, I just get past this point and my guide he won't be able to catch me, basically. And as soon as I thought, I'll just slip past there, he immediately said to me, it's not your time and you have to go back. And I bounced back into my body. And the profound sadness was so intense at that time, because I knew that was my last chance to get into there. And after about 3 weeks of the experiences, I was healed enough that I quit having them. And I missed it. I missed being able to leave my body. But I've had some incredible, incredible experiences over the years. I had one more time when I was able to leave my body a couple of years later during a surgery, and was told that was the last time that I'd be able to leave my body. But I am so grateful for these experiences. It took a lot of unpacking emotionally to understand them. But if I can help one person to understand that we are truly loved and that this is a hard life for everyone. We have a lot of trials and it's really not easy sometimes, but there are so many what I call light workers in this world, and we need to find the high energy of frequencies and not focus on the negatives and the hate and anger, and just bring the collective energy to a higher level of love. It's all about love. That's always my message. We are here to show love and be loved, and it's not about the best award we got at a ceremony. It's how we treat others, and so that's my desires to help others to feel that love and to know that we are all one and we are all loved.
I could talk forever, but we will close it now. And I just want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. And for our listeners, I will have Heather's her website, and the book will be there for you to be able to look at it. And just you are a gift and a blessing. And thank you, everybody, I'm so glad you were here and able to listen to Heather's story.
Thank you so much. This has been just the highlight of my day.
Mm-hmm.